Do you see the difference between these two words? If you speak German, you most certainly do. Those two dots aren't just there for decoration. They actually make the difference between Hofbräuhaus and Hofbrauhaus, which are, at least technically, different words. And it's this subtle difference that is at the heart of a long-running legal dispute between two breweries, one in Munich and the other in Dresden. But first, what actually is the difference between Hofbräuhaus and Hofbrauhaus? Well, there's almost no difference at all, and people probably don't even think about it. As far as I can tell, the difference is that a Brauhaus is a place where beer is brewed, and a Bräuhaus is a place where you can find beer that has been brewed, I think. And in case you're wondering, the Hof part means that it's related to a royal court. I mean, not since 1918, obviously, because that's when Germany became a republic, but that is the origin of the name. The chances are you have probably heard of the Munich Hofbräuhaus with an umlaut. This is an incredibly popular tourist attraction, and the beer served there comes from a brewery which has existed since the 16th century and which trademarked its name in 1879. It has proved so popular, in fact, that the brewery has successfully established Hofbräuhäuser in many countries all over the world, like this one in Las Vegas. And yes, Hofbräuhäuser is the plural of Hofbräuhaus. The other party in this dispute is the Dresdner Hofbrauhaus without an umlaut. This is a much smaller, much less well-known brewery which claims to have been founded in 1872. Back in 2011, the owner, a certain Jorn Scheller, applied for trademark protection. And that's when the Munich Hofbräuhaus objected. Scheller would have to follow the example of all the other Hofbrauhäuser and Hofbräuhäuser in Germany, and there are quite a few, and obtain a license from the Munich Hofbräuhaus to be allowed to use the name. Not so, argued Scheller. His brewery does not have an umlaut. It's a different word from the one trademarked by the Munich Hofbräuhaus. And so the case has now ended up in court. Now at this point you might be thinking, as I did, that this is a classic case of a massive global corporation picking on smaller companies out of sheer greed. Rather like the time that the Academy of Motion Picture Arts and Sciences forced a small bistro in Aschaffenburg to change its name from Oscar for no good reason. But it turns out that there's a bit more to this story than that. The latest development in this saga is that the judge, whose unenviable task it is to sort out this mess, has urged the two sides to come to an agreement already, because the longer this drags on, the more expensive it's going to get. In fact, she's gone so far as to actually make a suggestion for a compromise, that Scheller drop the Hof from the brand name, in return for which the Munich Hofbräuhaus should drop its demands for compensation. Which is basically telling Scheller that she doesn't think he has much chance of winning this one. See, while Scheller is technically correct that Brauhaus and Bräuhaus are different words, the big brewery does have a legitimate complaint stemming from the fact that it is internationally known, including in countries where this is not a thing. An example of why this is an issue is in internet domain names. Now, as I said, the two dots aren't mere decoration. They are in fact shorthand for a letter E. And that's why if you go to the website of the original establishment in Munich, the domain name is spelled with an extra letter E instead of an umlaut sign. But people who don't know the German language don't know this. They're likely to view the umlaut as simply a mark that aids pronunciation, like accents in French. They certainly don't know that if you can't type the two dots, you're supposed to insert an extra letter. And so if you go to the website of, for example, the Las Vegas Hofbräuhaus, you'll see that the domain name simply ignores the umlaut altogether. And in all sorts of other contexts, the name may appear sometimes with and sometimes without an umlaut. To most Americans, this makes no difference. And so, while technically, yes, it was Hofbräuhaus with an umlaut that was trademarked, The whole point of a trademark is to ensure that customers are not misled or easily confused. If I were to open a chain of fast food restaurants and called it Burger Queen, I could expect a cease and desist letter pretty quickly. And remember when I said that the Dresden brewery claimed to have been founded in 1872? Well, apparently that is, at best, misleading. Scheller wasn't originally even a brewer. He was a supermarket manager, and it just so happened that under the forecourt of his supermarket was a well that had once been used by a company called Hofbrauhaus Aktienbierbrauerei und Malzfabrik zu Dresden. Now, that brewery did exist and it was founded in 1872, but it went out of business a century ago. Scheller simply built a cafe over the well, brewed his own beer, and then sold it as Dresdner Hofbrauhaus. And so, in this case, the judge appears to be of the opinion that Scheller looks like somebody who is attempting to cash in on the bigger company's success. That brewery is arguing that if they don't protect their trademark in this way, the trademark will become worthless. Scheller, meanwhile, is arguing that he's just a tiny local brewery continuing a local tradition. One thing's for sure, though. If the two sides can't settle out of court, this is going to drag on for several more months. Thank you for watching this far. If you're interested in learning more about the umlaut, simply click on the video in the blank space below me or on the link in the description. And you better do that soon, before I start to sing. What shall we do with the drunken sailor? What shall we do with the drunken sailor? What shall we do?